Now to one of Bill and Melinda Gates' primary goals, the eradication of malaria, which they call the forgotten epidemic. There were nearly 230 million cases of malaria in 2019, and more than 90% of them were in Africa. The parasite kills around 400,000 people every year, and most of those are under 5. So far, the Gates Foundation has committed some $3.5 billion towards a global fight against malaria. And now, after 50 years of research and failed trials, there has been significant progress. The first malaria vaccine to meet the WHO's target of 75% efficacy has reached phase 3 trials in Burkina Faso. And we can now speak to Professor Adrian Hill, the director of the Jenner Institute, which is developing the vaccine, and also Dr. Herman Sorgo, who is overseeing the trials in Burkina Faso, which is one of the worst affected countries. Welcome to both of you. Professor Hill, the vaccine has reached phase 3 trials. Why is this a significant milestone?
This is the final stage of testing any vaccine. And even though over 100 malaria vaccines have been tried in people in clinical trials, this is only the second to reach this stage of large-scale testing in almost 5,000 children in several countries in Africa. So this builds on results that came out of Burkina Faso and were published just recently, showing that the efficacy of this vaccine in Burkina Faso was high, 77%. And if we could replicate that in other countries and in a larger scale trial, that could be a very important public health tool for controlling malaria in Africa.
And scientists have been working on this for, what, half a century now?
Oh, way back, yes, about 100 years, but clinical trials started in the 1940s, became much more active in the 1980s. But because this is a disease caused by a parasite and not by a virus, which is a much simpler entity, it's been very much more difficult to make vaccines against parasites. And in fact, we don't have any on the market. So this would be a technical breakthrough as well if the trial succeeds.
Now, you've drawn the distinction between parasites and viruses, but you look at the pace of discovery for coronavirus, and it's not just that distinction, is it? It's all the regulatory hurdles and the money. Can you explain how, if the same approach was taken, how much more helpful it would be for your research?
Well, interestingly, last year in Africa, more people died, about 4 times as many, we estimate, from malaria as from COVID, even though COVID has been a global problem for the last year or so. But yes, we've learned from COVID that it is feasible to develop new vaccines much more quickly than even the greatest experts predicted back at the start of 2020. So maybe there's a lesson there for other vaccines, even though they're difficult, like malaria vaccines are, that we could be able to develop these more quickly and move them forward and save some of those 300,000 or so deaths that happen in children in Africa every year from malaria.
Dr. Herman Sorgo, you're overseeing the trials on the ground there in Burkina Faso. Just tell me, how do you actually go about organizing them, recruiting people to participate and so on?
For this phase 3 trial also, we started 2 months ago by running a census to identify all the eligible children, and our active social research team members contacted those parents to engage them, present the study, so that we are able, since 2 days from now, to start the enrollment of the children. It has been quite a long process, but as an organized research team, it's now rolling up slowly but surely.
Was it difficult to persuade people that your trials would be safe?
Of course, for any new adventure, there is always the question of safety, which is really key in our actual activity. But as I just said, we have a very transparent history of collaboration with the community, so that before we invite them to embark into our study, we have this discussion going from the community leaders to community stakeholders, committees, and before we invite a single parent to the clinic, they are already aware of what is about this study. And as just Professor Hill just said, this adventure has started like 2 years ago. So the community is somehow exposed to the nature of this vaccine and he's about, so that the reluctance to participate, it's not really an issue for the time being.
This is such an important issue for people in Burkina Faso. What do you tell them when they ask you, how long will we have to wait for a vaccine?
Of course. Myself is someone living here who grew up here, who knows what is malaria and how painful it is for me as an individual and for my community. But for having a good solution, it requires the necessary time so that we say we are set to run a trial and test this candidate vaccine, and it will take again 2 years to evaluate the efficacy of the study. And after that, if it's concluent as the result of the phase 3 that we just completed, we will be able in 3 to 4 years' time to provide to the world a new malaria vaccine. And that's the time that will take.
Well, it's a moment to look forward to. Dr. Herman Sorgo and Professor Adrian Hill, thank you both for your contributions to the Nexus. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, you can see this episode or any of our previous episodes on our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.